court. There's one seat available, and that I should say that seats become available when judges either decide to step down or because they reach a mandatory 75 retirement age. So, and judges elected, and this is the case for all the courts, serve 10-year terms. So, as I said, starting with the Commonwealth Court, 9-member court, and they're the first stop in any lawsuits filed by the state of Pennsylvania or filed against the state of Pennsylvania or other public agencies. And we also have a handy little PowerPoint here that I'm going to share that just has some pictures of everyone. Give me one second. I'm not used to this. Fun fact. I'm one of the least tech-savvy reporters I ever meet. Anyway, so as we said, here's our court primer. And Commonwealth Court. Now, Kate, would you like to start us off with Matt Wolf, the Democrat, the Commonwealth Court, Democrats candidate for Commonwealth Court?
Yeah. So I'll just go over his bio a little bit, go into some of his campaign finance background. But essentially, Wolf is currently a judge on the Philly Municipal Court. He's been a judge there since around 2017. He hears both like civil and criminal cases. Before his election, he worked as a trial attorney for about 25 years. He worked for his father's firm. He's worked for his own firm. He described his practice as mostly hearing civil rights law with a focus on employment claims and government misconduct. Notably, Wolf was also a member of the U.S. Army Reserves. He also served as an officer. He was deployed to Iraq and Afghanistan. And during deployment, he also served as a legal advisor to the Army. So he worked in a legal capacity while he was serving as well. Currently, he's still a member of the Pennsylvania National Guard, and he still trains new members of the Guard at Fort Indiantown Gap. Regarding his judicial philosophy and some of his public statements, so what we found was that Wolf said he's against judicial activism generally, called it unproductive. He considers that the current ethical standards in Pennsylvania's like judicial ethics are sufficient. And he also noted, I think Stephen will go into this a little bit more, but he's the only candidate of the two that has judicial experience. Megan Martin is a lawyer and served as Senate parliamentarian, but hasn't served on the courts before. But yeah, Wolf is endorsed by the state Democratic Party. He raised about $200,000 throughout the year so far, so not a huge amount. He got a decent amount from union and trades. I think his biggest donor was the PA Carpenters Association. I think they donated around $45,000, something to that extent, maybe $50,000. But that's sort of a quick roundup of Matt Wolf. But Stephen, do you want to take Megan Martin?
Yeah, so Megan Martin is a Cumberland County resident, and as Kate said, her main role before this was being the Senate parliamentarian secretary. So effectively what that means is she'd be standing to the, I guess, stage right of the lieutenant governor, if you ever had the pleasure of watching Pennsylvania Senate proceedings, and advising the lieutenant governor, whoever's presiding, on basically how to run the chamber. So this is a task that sort of requires knowing a lot about the state constitution, a lot about the chamber's rules, and a lot about the precedent. You basically have to study the entire precedent of the Pennsylvania Senate, or the House if you're that person, and basically tell the chair what the right precedent to do is. Before that, though, it's worth noting she had also served as an attorney for the U.S. Navy, and she also was a staffer attorney for Governors Tom Ridge and Tom Corbett, both Republicans, and she clerked for a Lancaster County judge. So take this all together, and the Pennsylvania Bar Association, they are they're the state bar. It's made up of all the lawyers. They do provide one of those small bits of like almost, I'd say, like objective information about candidates for judicial office, and they I put it in air quotes because people will go back and forth about even if the bar's recommendations are worth judging, and that's a separate conversation. But it's worth noting the bar does recommend her, and they said that she has substantial administrative law experience that will serve her well in Commonwealth Court, which doesn't have to take trials in the way that, say, other courts like Superior Court have to do. When it comes to her judicial philosophy, she said in a survey to the Pennsylvania Coalition for Civil Justice Reform that I am a strict constructionalist. I am a textualist and originalist. I do not believe the Constitution is a living document. And she said that Justices Samuel Alito and State Supreme Court Justice Kevin Brobson were her closest sort of judicial birds of a feather. And her campaign finance, she has been heavily financed, a name that'll come up a few times in this, by PACs associated with Jeff Yass. He's Pennsylvania's richest resident, and he's a libertarian who supported school choice and some other conservative causes. But a PAC associated with him, Commonwealth Partners, I believe, has given her campaign about $800,000 or so. That's been by far, I believe, one of her biggest sources. But some other normal Republican groups and state senators have contributed money to her campaign as well. So that's Commonwealth Court. So that's one seat, 10-year terms, as we mentioned. Those are the candidates. So now we have Superior Court. The Superior Court is so Commonwealth Court handles government appeals and government government appeals on governmental cases, and like I said, but Superior Court basically handles everything else. It's been described as one of the busiest trial courts, or just courts in it's not a trial court, one of the biggest courts in the country, because they handle appeals on pretty much everything that doesn't have to do with the government. If you file a lawsuit against your business partner and you don't like the local ruling, if you have been accused of violating probation, if it's a family court issue, if it's something about child custody, and you want an appeal because you feel like you didn't get a fair shake at the county level, it's going to go in front of the Superior Court. So that's what makes them really busy. There are 2 seats open. The court has
15
members.
members.
15. Thank you, Kate. And there are 2 seats open. I believe right now it's a 9-7 majority of justices elected as Republicans. And so Republicans have put up 2 candidates for these seats, Maria Batista and Harry Smale. Maria Batista is let me start with Harry Smale. I can remember it off the top of my head. Harry Smale is a Westmoreland County judge. He's been on that. He's been there since I believe it was about 2013 as an appointment, and he has issued, as a judge, he's actually issued quite a few rulings that we can kind of point to. For instance, he in 2020 was the election. He like there are judges in counties that will be made the election judge for an election, so they had the first crack at any cases. He was that judge in 2020, and he actually threw out a 204 provisional ballots cast by voters, saying that basically that they were cast wrongly because they were told by election workers that they also that they were told that they needed to sign the poll book in order to cast provisional ballot. That was actually incorrect. So the mistake was on the election workers, but Smale ended up ruling that these ballots should have been thrown out. And this was pointed to as, a sign that by the Republican Party, that he understands the necessity for secure elections, election integrity. He also has ruled in favor of a local newspaper that sued a local borough for violating the Sunshine Law, and he also upheld blocked a challenge to a local zoning ordinance that allowed fracking near a residential area. That decision was upheld by Commonwealth Court. So in questionnaires, he said his judicial philosophy is close to Antonin Scalia and also Neil Gorsuch, 2 Supreme Court justices. And he is recommended by the state bar, who said, based on his extensive background, legal ability, and temperament, he is deserving of, or he's recommended. And then Maria Batista is a candidate who is basically, she is a Clarion County resident, and she has worked as an assistant general counsel for multiple state departments, the Department of Health, Department of State, under both Governor Tom Corbett and Tom Wolf. She's also worked as a prosecutor in Franklin and Venango counties, and before all this, she was a contract specialist, or she is a contract specialist with the Department of State, and she also worked as the vice president of state and federal contracting for the Judge Group, a Wayne-based consulting firm. So in a survey, she said that in general, that Antonin Scalia is her role model, a name that comes up a lot in these surveys, and that she said it is not the role of a judge to legislate from the bench, and this is even more important when dealing with constitutional matters. I think it's worth noting too that the Pennsylvania Bar Association did not recommend her. She did not participate in their process. Their process basically means you submit a resume, you sit for some interviews, and they kind of make a judgment, and they interview people who you might have interacted with legally, lawyers, judges, etc. But she didn't participate, so she was not recommended. And I believe she's the only candidate in the entire race who the bar did not issue a recommendation on. But as I said, people will go back and forth about the utility of those recommendations. Anyway, so those are the Republican candidates, Maria Batista and Harry Smale. Kate, do you want to talk to us about the Democratic candidates?
Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, so first up is Jill Beck. So she's based in Pittsburgh, and she's actually doesn't have any experience as a judge, but she's clerked for a judge. So she's clerked for Judge Christine Donahue, who is both on the state Supreme Court and when she was on the Superior Court, where she was drafting opinions, working on topics like election matters, workers' compensation, congressional redistricting, but primarily after her time clerking, she has worked in commercial litigation. She's also worked at like a nonprofit, it's called Kids Voice, that advocates for children in the welfare system in Allegheny County. Beck also tried to run for Superior Court in 2021, but she lost the primary to Tamika Lane, who's actually now running with her for Superior Court. And yeah, following that, she's also worked at various law firms in Allegheny County, like private law firms working in commercial litigation. Regarding her judicial philosophy, Beck said that she'd most like to emulate Justice Anthony Kennedy when looking at Supreme Court justices. She described him as transcending partisan politics and someone who is engaged but restrained. I think this was something really struck me when we were listening through her candidate forum at the Pennsylvania for Modern Courts, like that they hosted. But she said about him that he was a consensus builder, a tiebreaker, and someone where you could never figure out which way he was going to come out on a case. And that's something that she described as, what she would like to emulate. Similarly, Beck was highly recommended by PBA. She was described as having like the highest combination of legal ability, experience, and integrity. And I did want to note that Beck was probably the highest raiser of campaign finance funds after the Supreme Court races. She pulled in about $1 million just by herself. I think a lot of that was unions. A lot of that was sort of party machinery, party operatives in the Allegheny County region. But she raised the most after Daniel McCaffrey, who we'll get to in a little bit with the state Supreme Court races. And the other Democratic candidate is Tamika Lane. She currently sits on the Philadelphia Court of Common Pleas, and she's sat there for about a decade. Again, she ran for Superior Court in 2021. She won the primary, but she lost the general to the Republican candidate. Lane actually began her career as a public school teacher in Maryland. She worked as a public school teacher for 4 years before going to law school at Rutgers, and then has worked in Philly in law ever since. She first clerked for Judge Renee Cardwell Hughes on the Philly Court of Common Pleas. She's also worked as a trial attorney for the Defenders Association of Philadelphia, and just prior to her election to the bench, she served as legal counsel for State Senator Anthony Williams, who's a Philadelphia senator. When asked about her, judicial heroes, she said she'd most like to emulate Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson. She said her judicial philosophy included ensuring that everyone in her courtroom received a fair trial, and that they felt respected in her court. The PBA also recommended her as they also rated her highly recommended, saying that they were really confident in her capable of an outstanding performance as Superior Court justice in Pennsylvania. Regarding Lane's finances, I believe she raised about $600,000, just over $500,000, so a little bit less than Beck, but more than the her Republican counterparts, who I think both collectively raised about $250,000. But Lane received big donations from Committee for a Better Tomorrow, which is this Democratic-based political action group, and a lot from unions as well. And then we did also want to note regarding Superior Court elections that while there are 2 open seats, there are also 2 justices who are up for retention. So every 10 years, you vote to keep a justice on the bench once they've been elected that first time. It's like a yes or no vote. And typically these votes pretty much always go through. I think there's only one in the past 2 decades that hasn't succeeded. But this time around, it's Judge Vic Stabile, who is a Republican, who was elected in 2013, who's seeking a second term. And the other judge is the president judge, Jack Piniella, who's a Democrat elected in 2003, and he's seeking a third term. So those are our Superior Court and Commonwealth Court justice candidates. I think now we'll move on to Supreme Court. I can start going through that a little bit, but yeah, so the state Supreme Court is essentially the final say on Pennsylvania law. So Commonwealth Court is kind of seen as the first step, right? They'll issue an initial opinion on things like redistricting, on Pennsylvania, whether we can join the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, things like that. But Superior Court is sort of seen as the last and final step. So what they say goes, and they definitely have a lot of sway over how things turn out in Pennsylvania. I think for me, the most apt example is probably redistricting. They have the final say. They had the final say on both our congressional and legislative maps. These are the maps. The legislative map is the one that flipped the House this year. And I believe it's a 9-member court, Stephen. Am I right?
7-member court.
7-member court. And it's yeah. But currently Democrats hold 4 seats, Republicans hold 3. The chief
hold 2.
Right, because it's not full. There's a seat missing right now. Yeah. And yeah, the Chief Justice Max Baer passed away last fall, and this election is to fill his seat. As we mentioned, Democrats currently hold a strong majority on this bench. So that's it started, I believe, in 2015 when there was millions of dollars injected into the race, and they flipped 3 seats all at once. So while this race might not, completely shift the balance of power, it's sort of seen as a step in that direction, or at least a potential step. And again, there's millions of dollars going to this race. I believe between these 2 candidates, how much they've raised just in the past year, it's somewhere in the ballpark of $6 million. But I think, Stephen, do you want to start with going through Judge Carluccio's background?
Yeah, I will also, like, kind of piggybacking off what Kate said, like with this court, it's a lot of money has been spent on it. A lot more money has been spent. That really expensive 2015 race, I think, was about $13 million with 3 seats on the line. And we're starting to see Supreme Court races cost $8-9 million just for 1 seat. So people with money, special interests, are looking at these races more and more importantly. And as Kate said, it's like they have final say on abortion law, election law, gun laws, COVID, everything. Spotlight PA just put a really nice story, I think, tried to highlight some of these rulings. So, we can, we'll try to, make, like, it's there. It's, there's a lot of issues. Any issue you care about probably comes before the state Supreme Court. So people are paying attention who care about politics. So that's a reason to pay attention to. Carolyn Carluccio is a Republican candidate. She is a judge on the Montgomery County Court of Common Pleas since 2009. And I should say she's the president judge right now. She was selected, I believe, unanimously by her colleagues. Effectively, that means she kind of has more administrative roles, like she's has the final say on certain things like that. Like just in terms of the hiring, firing, like making sure that the court is administratively running proficiently. So Before she became a judge, though, Carluccio has been both a prosecutor and a public defender. She was a federal prosecutor. She was a Montgomery County's chief public defender too, from 2002 to 2006. She also has worked as a solicitor for Montgomery County, so the lawyer for the county itself to make sure they're sort of, filing lawsuits or not losing lawsuits. And she also even had a stint as the acting director of the Human Resources Department for the county for about a year from 2008 to 2009. So she is highly recommended by the State Bar Association, who said she is a highly respected jurist. That was ahead of this year's primary. Obviously, that still applies. Some of her cases as a common pleas judge, she doesn't get as many weighty cases as someone on Superior Court or Commonwealth Court, but looking at her record, one thing we found was, for instance, she ruled, and these, I should say, these cases are ones we're getting from their bar recommendation applications. We looked at these. Like they have to list some cases they think show their judicial philosophy to an extent, and so she said she ruled in favor of Montgomery County landowner whose property was partially flooded from Pennsylvania Turnpike runoff. She sided with a developer who sought to knock down an old mansion and build some senior housing with their plan, and when it came into conflict, some local government, overlapping actions. And she also reinstated a municipal police officer who she found was fired wrongly by the local government, citing Pennsylvania civil services laws after he provided an excuse that kind of changed over time. And all of those decisions were upheld by appellate courts. When it comes to her judicial philosophy, she has said she is aligned with Antonin Scalia, that said that Justice Scalia's originalism, embodied by separation of powers, understanding original intent, and applying the laws as written, reflects my judicial philosophy. And I should also say, too, on some weighty issues during the Republican primary where she faced a pretty conservative opponent, she did say that she thought that no excuse mail-in ballots were very bad for our Commonwealth and that she would welcome that to come up before her again. And she also has been attacked by some groups like Planned Parenthood for her position on abortion. Mostly what they've gone off of is a fact that she's been endorsed by the Pro-Life Federation. But Carluccio said that she rejects judicial activisms and that women's reproductive rights are protected by Pennsylvania law, and that she will uphold the law and that only the governor and the legislature can change that. So, that those are kind of some of her biggest points. Oh, I should point out too, on fundraising, she has been backed by about $1.3 million from Commonwealth Leaders Fund, which is the majority of her fundraising. I believe that's about $2 and $3 that she's raised since the start of the year. Commonwealth Leaders Fund, as I said, is that a political action group that is funded mostly by Jeff Yass, our richest resident. And now Daniel McCaffrey is the Democratic candidate. And Kate, do you want to give us a rundown on him?
Yes. And I think it's actually more. I think it's closer to 2.1 is the total amount that Carluccio has gotten from Commonwealth Leaders Fund. But there was a $1.2 million single donation that really, set the bar high. But yes, I'll go over Daniel McCaffrey's bio a little bit. But yeah, he's currently a judge on the Superior Court where he was elected to in 2019. But sort of to go back, McCaffrey joined the military at age 18, and he served for 3 years and was then honorably discharged. He then attended Temple for his undergrad and law degree. He began his professional career working at the Philly District Attorney's Office as a prosecutor in the Major Trials Unit. He then joined a Montgomery County-based law firm, Friedman Schumann, where he chaired the litigation department and served on its management committee until he joined the Court of Common Pleas in 2013. Some sort of interesting parts of McCaffrey's background, notably his older brother is former state Supreme Court Justice Seamus McCaffrey. Seamus McCaffrey, who resigned from his post when in 2014, after a review from the Pennsylvania Attorney General's office found that he was sending sexually explicit images and videos to state officials through his government emails. And he did send some of those emails to his brother, Daniel McCaffrey, the current candidate, who was then on the Court of Common Pleas. But yeah, McCaffrey also has a long history in Democratic politics. He's volunteered as legal counsel for the Philly Democratic City Council. He's been a member of the Pennsylvania Democratic State Committee. And that actually was a point against him when the Philly Inquirer was endorsing candidates. They backed his opponent in the primary, another Superior Court judge, Deborah Kunzelman. They wrote that McCaffrey was too enmeshed in party politics, which is what turned them off of him. Another just part of his background, in 2014, he was also named when then Attorney General Kathleen Kane decided to end a sting operation that had captured a lot of Philly lawmakers sort of illegally accepting money. McCaffrey had initially accepted the straw money, but he didn't realize that it was illegally donated. So once he reported and returned the money once discovering the donations were made in an improper manner. But that's sort of a quick run through of McCaffrey's background. Also, McCaffrey was rated highly recommended by the Pennsylvania Bar Association. About his sort of judicial philosophy and why he was running, he really emphasized that he believed that the democratic institutions that sort of govern our country were under attack, and that was a large part of why he decided to run. Some of his what he considered his most important decisions included opinions that argued that law enforcement officers should be limited when conducting voluntary searches. That plaintiffs should have a right to trial. This one plaintiff should have a right to trial after she suffered an injury while riding an Uber, despite initially agreeing to the terms and services of Uber. McCaffrey's also received endorsements, like I said, from the state Democratic Party, from Pennsylvania Conference of Teamsters, from Pennsylvania Building and Construction Trades Council. He's gotten a lot of union money. That's certainly, I think, close to $500,000. And then he also described during his Superior Court run, his sort of the candidate or the justice representing his judicial philosophy the most is the Chief Justice John Roberts on the Supreme Court. And that's sort of indicative of what his judicial policies are. I think other than that, on McCaffrey's campaign finance, I believe he received $750,000 from the Committee for a Better Tomorrow, and then another $250,000 from the PA Judicial PAC, and that was a big chunk of his funds. So that's a lot of money from like trial attorneys and lawyer organizations. But yeah, outside of that, it was mostly union money. I think he also received about $75,000 from the state Democratic Party. But in total, he raised just over $2 million. So still much less than Carluccio, but a decent sum overall. But yeah, that was a quick summary of Daniel McCaffrey. I think now we should have some time to go through some audience questions, I believe. I think we had some pre-received that we can start to go through. Yeah, so this one's from William S. So it's sort of long-winded, but I think the sum of it is, in reviewing and trying to analyze a judge's record, why don't we get to see how many of their decisions have been overturned in appeal? Stephen, do you want to initially take that? I know I also have some thoughts.
Yeah, I think in general what you find with judicial races is they're hard to cover for reasons like that. Like I think that so first off, to find out how many decisions have been upheld, we'd have to be able to have a central database of every decision they've made. I feel like there could be a lot of different cases that could be filed in a lot of different ways and decided different ways. So I'll be honest, like I think that whether it's Spotlight or your local newspaper or really anyone, that's just like that's a big ask for these races that I think are only slowly starting to get of the attention that they do deserve. Not saying that it's something we'd write off entirely, but it would be a project. So I think what we've tried to do is we have, with the way Spotlight's approach to selection is trying to focus more on the cases. I mean, I remember when I started, I wasn't looking for any cases decided by judicial candidates, and now we're trying to do that. So, there's a lot of there's a lot of there historically has not been a lot of information put out there on these candidates, and I think in general, definitely appreciate that suggestion. It's something that we could try and take a crack at, but this is a work in progress, and I think we're trying to do our best to get just more information out on judicial candidates.
Yeah, I think the logistical aspect is definitely one part of it. I think another thing is that the appeals can be really specific to the details of each case. So to know, it would just really rely on us having to read every single case, right? Because sometimes it can be turned on a technicality, like something procedurally was wrong. Sometimes there's an ideological difference between the initial judge and the judge that then appeals the case. So I think that yeah, definitely is a good thought. And I think that we could definitely do more on reading the specific cases that these judges deem they're most important. And we try to do that as much as we can with the PA bar questionnaire. But I think to read, like to have it reduced down to a percentage, I think wouldn't be as helpful, just because it would rely so much on the intricacies of each individual case. So that's I think what came up in my mind. I think another question we got before was from Carol P. Do any of the candidates have experience in the justice system as attorneys or law enforcement? I think we went over a decent amount of that, but just to summarize, I believe Tamika Lane was a defender. Matt Wolf did not, and McCaffrey also had experience as prosecutor. That's amongst the Democratic candidates.
Yeah. And Carluccio was a public defender as well as a prosecutor. Maria Batista has been a prosecutor. Harry Smale was a solicitor for multiple county agencies in Westmoreland County. And I believe he also before that was like a family law attorney. And Megan Martin has not served as a prosecutor or public defender. That's she mostly has administrative law experience.
I do think the Order of Fraternal Police or Fraternal Order of Police has donated to McCaffrey, Tamika Lane, and I think just those two, just as a side note, them not directly related, but just some fun side information. Let's see, Stephen, do you have any other questions you see off the top of your head?
Yeah, I saw a question asking for more about retention elections, which I can jump into if you don't mind, Kate, unless you're really I figured. So yeah, as we noted, judges are initially elected in partisan elections, and then they are re-elected for another 10-year term in retention elections, and these are just the up or down votes, yes or no. Normally you win. The only judge who lost was I believe it was Russell Nigro in 2005 amid the pay raise scandal, which some might remember, where basically people were just really mad at the state of politics overall and decided let's vote against this justice. And that's pretty much the only time someone's ever lost retention. And so up for retention this year are two judges, both on Superior Court, Judge Vic Sabile, elected in 2013, seeking a second term, and President Judge Jack Piniella, elected as a Democrat, seeking a third. As we said, Superior Court's the first stop for appeals on criminal and civil cases. Sabile was elected as a Republican. I should say too, both are recommended for retention by the bar. Obviously, those recommendations are going to come up a lot. They're one of the main things we can point to. But in some of his high-profile decisions, he reinstated charges against an engineer in a deadly Amtrak crash on procedural grounds. That was, I believe, the crash in Philadelphia from 2015-16. He dissented actually in the decision that McCaffrey cites about Uber and people being able to sue them over a crash. He dissented in that case. He also wrote an opinion upholding a misdemeanor child endangerment conviction for former Penn State President Graham Spanier in the Jerry Sandusky child abuse scandal. And then as for Piniella, Some of his more recent opinions have he upheld a more than 1,000-year sentence against a man convicted of long-term child molestation, whose attorneys had argued he had dementia. He found that people who steal money from nonprofits aren't shielded from having to pay restitution. He allowed a Pittsburgh dentist to file an insurance claim over pandemic losses, like because his business closed. And he also wrote the decision that vacated the decade-old gun and drug charges against rapper Meek Mill over his whole situation with probation, where he was trapped in that situation. So those are the big decisions we can point to for retention on Judges Stabile and Piniella.
I know, Stephen, we've discussed recently, like, about sort of the standards for judges when they're running for office. We have a question from Lisa Von On. She says, like, the Commonwealth Leader Fund mailers for Carluccio has gotten very nasty, lacking context in the campaign contribution, probe of McCaffrey, calling him an extremist. She wanted to know how strict is the PA Bar Association about enforcing guidelines that seem to be against such statements. So if we could, like, broadly talk about the judicial code of ethics and how that affects running.
Yeah. A great question. And that's kind of, I think, what makes judicial races so hard, is there are these very special rules, and there are the canons of judicial conduct that kind of dictate how you can behave. So you're not supposed to, as a judge, directly opine on any sort of political position. You're not supposed to say I am pro or anti-abortion. You're not supposed to say I'm pro or anti-guns. I'm pro or anti-anything. And there's also another small thing is you actually are not allowed, if you're as a judicial candidate, to directly ask anyone for money. You're supposed to have a finance director who does that yourself. So and obviously, though, as Kate mentioned, lawyers are big donors to these races. Also, a lot of business interests are big donors to these races. There's still a lot of money that comes in. Judicial law does also say that if a lawyer is in front of you, or a cause is in front of you that, like, they've been a big contributor to you, you're supposed to bow out. So I think the enforcement has always been tough because judiciary sort of, they get to rule unconstitutional anything that might affect that might regulate them. This is sort of the, an issue I think we see with judges and just judiciaries overall. Not saying that's good or bad, but just sort of when you're trying to write regulations. And when it comes to the bar, they try and step in and set rules for how you can run ads. To get that recommendation, you have to sign a pledge that, like, I will kind of keep it clean politically. I won't try to do cheap shots. Those are I think enforcement, look, I haven't talked to the bar recently, but I feel pretty comfortable saying, like, as an overall observation on our level of politics from covering it for 5 years, is there's not as much maybe shame as there used to be, and the process of trying to name and shame people if they violate a rule that's been laid down, like, say, by the bar, and that isn't like a strong legal standard, it just doesn't work as well. And so, like, the bar could step in, and I think we've seen that happen, but I also think they're probably also trying to figure out how do we step in a way that doesn't seem partisan, and doesn't feel like we're putting our hands on the scale. It's a hard situation to referee political debates. I also say that as a reporter who, we're sometimes called upon to do that quite literally in moderating debates. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that is the best I got.
Yeah, and I would also add there's also a lot of outside interest in these groups now. So it's not like the Commonwealth Leader Funds is not subject to the same rules that the judicial candidates are. So they might be acting in the service of a candidate, but they're not a representative of that candidate. So they don't have to follow the same kind of rules. Like, I know Planned Parenthood said they're spending 6 figures. ACLU announced they're going to spend like $1 million this last month. I don't think we've totaled the independent expenditures yet, but it's also a decent amount, like somewhere in the 6 figures. So that's just a little side note where regarding your question specifically, you mentioned Commonwealth Leader Fund, and because they're not subject to those same standards that the candidates are themselves, they don't have to censor themselves as much as a candidate would. So that's just another side note. Let me see what other questions we have. Stephen, do you see any off the top of your head?
I did see a question. I kind of meant to maybe mention this at the top with the Supreme Court, is that I did see a few questions talking about 2025. We've reported this, is that just I do believe that there's one thing to be said too about this Supreme Court race is just I think everyone in politics also has their eyes when it comes to retention on the 2025 election. I believe, as Kate mentioned, this Democratic majority was elected for 10-year terms in 2015, 3 judges all at once, and they are going to be up for re-election for 10-year terms in 2025. I think Republicans have made no secret they plan to try and beat those candidates in retention elections. That is something that we haven't seen before, which is also why I would 100% say, this is a really good time to get up to speed on judicial elections, because I would say there's probably a high potential for a lot of ads to be thrown around, and a lot of things to be said. The earlier you start paying attention, the better it is to try and figure out what is happening instead of trying to jump in midstream. I even feel that as a reporter, because there's nothing worse than dropping in a storyline like when it's 32 weeks old. So yeah, I mean, I can't speak for what the attacks will be. I can't speak for how the bar will act. I can't speak for, how messy it'll get. Politics is politics, but with those 3 Democrats up in for retention in 2025, I'm expecting that could be a hard fought election. And I guess the other thing I would just add is that if a judge does lose retention, what that means is basically like that their seat is filled at the next judicial election. So that would be then 2027. There could be an appointment in the meantime, but that requires a 2/3 vote of the state Senate. I will simply say that's a high bar. Whether you're talking about the U.S. Senate or the Pennsylvania State Senate, 2/3 of any chamber is a very, very high bar.
And I saw a really quick basic question from Eileen. Are all PA judges elected? And I believe yes, they are. They're elected in partisan elections, and then they're retained in 10-year terms. So that's just a quick one we can, or I guess some of them are 6-year terms for the magisterial and municipal courts, but mostly 10-year terms. I'm looking through notes to see if there's anything else.
I think we got a question, somebody asking how judges are assigned cases. I'll just be honest, I don't know the answer to that. I apologize. I am a reporter, not a lawyer or a member of the court's administrative staff. So I do not know, and I won't try to hazard an answer.
Okay. Let's see. I see. Why do R's and D's never officially state their party affiliation in ads and commercials? I don't think that's a hard and fast rule. I think generally I also don't see them, but I would hazard a guess to say that they probably want to avoid strictly partisan labels when running as a judge on any bench, where you're supposed to avoid sort of attaching yourself to any sort of political affiliation. But yeah, Stephen, anything you want to add to that?
I think you probably nailed it, Kate.
Great. Let's see if there's anything else. I think that's most of the questions. And I think we're almost at the end of our time too. I think we have like a minute or two left. If there's anything quick that you see, Stephen, that you want to address, but if not, I can wrap it up here as well.
I will say yes, McCaffrey is the Democratic candidate. We're sorry about that typo. Just to really hammer that, it is Carolyn Curry is Republican, Daniel McCaffrey is the Democrat. A basic fact, but that is the case for the Supreme Court election, if that's important.
Okay, perfect. I think I think that should be everything. But yeah, thank you all for coming tonight. I think we'll have plenty of time for y'all to get to the Phillies game at 8. Steve, I think that's when it starts with the Braves.
Yes, that is when it starts, Kate. Yes.
Thank you. And you can find more of our events at www.spotlightpa.org/events. Any questions or comments can be directed to Yasmin, our events coordinator, who's lovely and operating this event tonight. So thanks everyone for coming.
Thank you.